New York's controversial stop and frisk program resumes despite a new court ruling this week. An appellate court overturned a federal court ruling this week saying that the policy was unconstitutional. It allowed the officers to stop and frisk people they believe are suspicious under this policy, even if they committed no crime. Critics say officers unfairly target minorities. So let's talk to Ellis Henican. He lives in New York, and he's a columnist for Newsday. And Micahel Balboni, he's a former director of Homeland Security for New York State. Good to see you as well. So just so people aren't confused, we're talking about a federal court judge who said this policy is unconstitutional, but an appellate court said we have a problem with this judge. So essentially, the stop and frisk policy continues in New York City, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, the future of it, how it is executed, etc. So, Micahel, you first. You know, you say we're in a post 9/11 day. And so having this stop and frisk policy is necessary. Of course, critics are saying that unfairly African Americans and Hispanics are profiled, are targeted the most. Why do you think this policy needs to continue to be in place in New York?
The criminal procedure law of New York State is very clear. It requires reasonable suspicion that an individual is either has committed, is committing, or will commit a misdemeanor or felony under New York State law. And that gives the officer the ability to inquire. Now, what's happened is that this whole debate has been around the stop and frisk, but actually that's not the law. The law is really to stop and inquire. If the officer believes that there's something on the person that could pose a threat, then they have the ability to frisk. Now, of course, that's the law. It's a law across the entire state, not just New York City. And the legislature has revisited and basically supported it throughout the years. How it is implemented, that's really the challenge for law enforcement officials.
Okay, but when we talk particularly about a post-9/11 world, many folks would advocate that, okay, if it appears as though somebody is involved in some suspicious or potential terroristic activity, that argument might apply. But many legal minds will say the majority of the people who are being stopped and frisked, their activity, their quote-unquote suspicious activity has nothing to do with terrorism.
Well, for the police department, it's always a challenge. And by the way, the New York City Police Department is one of the most diverse police departments in the world. So it has the building blocks to be able to develop the kind of relationship with the community. And, you know, the courts have always said about policing that it has to evolve. It has to get better, both in terms of equipment, tactics, and procedures. So that's what's going to be happening now. We have a new election just in a couple of days, and it's going to give the new administration the opportunity to take another look at how this is implemented. But the law itself is pretty clear.
And it could go either way. The Republican contender, Lotta, is for this stop and frisk. The Democrat, de Blasio, is very much against it. Is there a way in which to determine or ascertain what the majority of New Yorkers are looking for?
I think, again, one side, you have the argument that, look at the statistics, that several years ago, New York City had 2,300 murders a year. It's now one of the safest big cities in America, not the safest. That's one argument. The other argument is just we had LAX, and we had the shooting there yesterday, as well as in the Navy Yard shooter. If an officer found somebody who looked suspicious and had a bulge, and then went and intercepted them and talked to them, and maybe they could have stopped this. So the question is, if you didn't use this, what would you replace it with?
Okay, let me bring in Ellis Henican here. So, Ellis, the argument being made, even Mayor Bloomberg has been arguing that the murder rate, the rate of other crimes has been lowered in large part, is his argument, and others because of this stop and frisk ruling. But then when you have others who are complaining that they are unfairly being targeted, how do you strike a balance here? What are you finding, Ellis?
This is a well-meaning police tactic that has lost its legitimacy. Right. Every year, hundreds of thousands of innocent people, most of them, you're right, young Hispanic and black males, are stopped. These are kids who are going to school and are going to their work and are out with their family, and they are put through a humiliating and unpleasant and frankly, sometimes quite intimidating search by police. And we know, this is police statistics, we know that 90% of those people are not doing anything wrong at all. The whole purpose of this really has nothing to do with terrorism. The idea was that it was about getting guns off of the street. 1 in 500 of these searches, Fred, has produced a gun. And you know what? The cost of it is just too high. It's produced huge amount of resentment, and a gigantic number of New Yorkers at this point are saying, whoa, hold on a second. Even if the intention was good, the social costs of this thing are just too high.
So then if only 1 in 500, as you say, searches results in someone having the possession of a gun, then why is this a policy that continues to be used? It doesn't seem like that is bringing the kinds of results that were intended from this policy. It would seem that the makers of this policy might be embarrassed that the numbers are as you reflect. Ellis.
Well, listen, there's no evidence, firm data that actually says that it's working. On the other hand, you know what? It's popular. I mean, some people, and Michael would be an example of this, like the idea of police out sticking their hands in the pockets of young males on the street. And, you know, maybe once in a while you do get a bad guy off the street. But in our society, we have to balance people's constitutional rights and the relationship of the police and the community. The cops are not an occupying army. This is the era of community policing. The police have to get along with the people out there. And sadly, this tactic has undermined that over many years of hundreds of thousands of innocent people being stopped. It's run out of gas. We got to stop it.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Ellis Henican and Micahel Balboni, thanks so much, gentlemen, for your time. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Fred.